Hi everyone, and welcome to this rebooted version of our podcast series, Make It Mesh. I'm your host for this episode, Tia Loudon, and I sat down with Cynthia Coan, a senior engineer here at Tetrate. She is an Envoy contributor, a maintainer of GetEnvoy, and most recently, the Istio 1.7 release manager. We sat down to talk about all the recent advancements in Istio aimed at making VMs first-class citizens in the mesh. I hope you enjoy. So let's dive in. So what was it about these two releases that was so important? What about the inclusion of VMs has really changed service mesh?
Yeah. So I think the big part of these two releases was really the fact that Istio acknowledged that lots of people still have VMs. It's not all greenfield development, and there's a lot of things that are sort of VM based and make sense on VMs. There are certain types of workloads that still make sense there, as well as people who just are wanting to migrate, but they can't just do a full drop and replace because they have too much traffic, or it's just organizationally taxing in order to do that. And so Istio has really taken advantage of this fact that, VMs need a story. No one has really started providing for it yet, and we've really started taking steps to make it as easy to include a VM into the mesh as it would be, a normal pod running in Kubernetes. And so it's been really exciting to see, realizing that this was a massive problem that people were facing and actually laying all of the groundwork so we can actually now start supporting VMs just like normal pods, and we can help not only those legacy customers, but also, people who just have workloads that run better on VMs. So very exciting.
It really is. And I think this is something that as Tetrate we've waited for quite some time, and that we've been involved with from pretty much from the very beginning, before Tetrate even was Tetrate. We didn't exist at that point. So
we've definitely been that way since the beginning, where we realized, one big thing for us is we really like asking our customers what problems they're having. And that was one of the, again, loudest messages. So we've actually had some internal tools for a while that we've been working with what we've learned with the open source community and helping share our tooling along the way. And so, it's been super great, and I'm happy to see it adopted more widely.
From an engineering perspective, what can the end user see now? What has 1.6 and 1.7 enabled them to do?
Yeah, so a big part about 1.6 and 1.7 is effectively all of the groundwork is there, and a lot of the ways of describing these resources is there. So one of the big things in 1.6 was the addition of workload entries. Workload entries allow you to effectively describe a VM exactly as you would a host running in Kubernetes, right? It has multiple services that are attached to that workload entry. So that way you can have this nice set of, before you really only had service entry. So if you had multiple things running on the same VM, it was very hard to model that in an API and say all of the things on this particular VM, I want to have this policy, or what's running on this VM, right? It was impossible to answer those questions. So workload entry gave us the ability to describe those things outside of the mesh and say, this is a VM, it has these services running on it, this is how you talk to those services, and they all relate back to that VM. So you got that really nice API model. And you get that automatic enrollment of, hey, this is a new VM that stood up, I'm going to go create a workload entry for it. And then 1.7 really started adding the foundations for bootstrapping VMs into the mesh automatically. So no longer do you have to go run a series of manual commands to hopefully, get a VM into the mesh to start talking to everything else, right? You can just create a token and give that token to Istio, and then Istio will go through and do all of the complicated setup tasks, like setting up mutual TLS and doing all the other sort of setup tasks that Istio would normally do in a pod, but on your VM. So that way your VMs can stand up just as if they were running, on a pod in Kubernetes. And that work, although it's still a bit early, right? So there's still maybe more manual commands than we want. All of the groundwork is there for us to deliver a really smooth experience. And so I think for the first time, customers can actually follow the docs on Istio and actually see a VM in their mesh with not too much trouble.
And so what troubles have we taken away from engineers? Because I imagine that when we're looking at working in a hybrid environment, and prior to 1.6 and 1.7, there may have been a lot of workload duplication. There was a lot of, checks and balances to make sure that you're making your policies mirror one environment and the other. So what have we stopped engineers from worrying about by having this addition?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we've stopped them worrying about is, exactly as you mentioned with duplication. I sort of mentioned it earlier with service entries and workload entry, right? You now have the ability to visualize and apply things to the VM itself, regardless of all the services underneath it. And so when you just don't have that duplication work of having to like copy and paste the exact same config rule for everything on a VM, right? That unlocks a lot more possibilities. Because you can also describe the VMs yourselves, you can do things based off of the tags of those VMs, right? So you can say, well, all of my EC2 instances that need this policy are tagged this way. You can just natively bring those in and apply policies to those tags. So that's, removing a whole bunch of the duplication work. So engineers effectively have like that one pane of glass that they have to configure. And then a lot of work for bootstrapping has actually been security related. There's a lot of attack vectors that come in when you're talking about automatically introducing new machines that aren't running in Kubernetes into the mesh, right? That's a very big attack vector. What's stopping an attacker from just stealing something and then connecting from, their local machine to the mesh, and now they can talk to everything, right? That's a pretty big security hole. And so we've done a lot to not only simplify that experience, certificates are very complicated. So moving away from that mainly and doing tokens as sort of very short-lived tokens, is this core method of authentication that then generates, two different sets of credentials that then allows everything to talk to each other, right? Engineers just don't have to worry about that anymore. And so a lot less foot guns is better for everyone, especially when it comes to security.
I mean, if you're an enterprise customer and you know that your engineers are taking that amount of time to match the workloads in different environments, and I mean, the security risk sounds terrifying. So this must be huge. Like, regardless of the size of your organization, these are things that are going to be monumental for you to be able to move forward.
Yeah, like I said, it's really, pretty much all of the foundational work, right? So VMs are supported in Istio today, right? And although we're moving towards making an easier experience for people while keeping the same properties that we've now built in 1.7, all of the properties are there, right? You get the nice security properties, you get the nice API properties that, all of the hard stuff has effectively been built. Now we actually just get to go and do the fun stuff and take user feedback about what's hard and actually make something that they enjoy using, hopefully.
So improving the user experience is something that you just mentioned. So what's next? What's going to be those steps that we see in either 1.8 or with, within Envoy or GetEnvoy, for example, that's going to really cement that user experience? Yeah,
there's a couple sort of RFCs that were proposed for Istio for how to make VM integration easier. The one that we're championing that we've seen work really, really well with our customers from experience is what's called the sidecar bootstrap command. So what this allows you to do is effectively the user workflow would be you have a new VM come online. It registers itself as a workload entry through some external source like AWS, automatically picking up new instances that are launched. You've got like OpenShift and GCP have very similar concepts. And then what you do is you can run a single workload or sidecar bootstrap command, and that will effectively do all of the hard work for you, right? So all you need is one administrator account, and it will completely bootstrap that VM and get Istio running for you. So that's sort of what we're hoping for, right? Is just one command, and the VM is totally ready to go with Istio, and this can be run from anywhere that you want it to be run from, and with a relatively limited admin account, although it is still highly permissioned because you have to introduce a new identity. It's relatively scoped down. So we are planning on releasing it in GetEnvoy, probably by the end of September. So that way there's an open source way that people can actively start playing with the command that we want to finalize today to start getting feedback. And then once we feel we're confident enough that we've got the correct command line arguments down and we've used it with our customers enough, we'll then merge it into upstream Istio, so that way everyone can use it.
It sounds like a pretty amazing journey to be part of, and
it's been very exciting to be there. Regardless if you're cheering on the stand lines or actually writing some code, it's been pretty great to see how far these features have come.
I can't wait to see what's next. I really can't. We always look forward to every release and to hearing back from our customers as to what they think about what's going on as well. So
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for your time and for sitting and chatting. And there is so much more to come, not just from the open source community, obviously, but as we said, this is a new format. We're going to be doing this more. So look for a demo video that's going to go up soon.
And hopefully you can wait until the next release.
And don't forget, you can reach out to us at learn@tetrate.io as well. So if you've got questions that have arisen from listening to Cynthia and I's chat, or you want to get in touch about any of our support products as well, reach out and find out more. So thank you very much and take care.
Thank you.